Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay. Let's see. Good morning. Let's adjust the light just slightly. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to my weekly virtual office hours. This week's mural is another one from my visit to Reno a few weeks ago. There's lots of amazing art along the river walk, but for me, this was kind of a cute one. So this was a raccoon with a skateboard. So definitely kind of interesting from that standpoint. It was part of their river walk and their skateboard area that a lot of people were out skateboarding, but they had these murals with these very happy raccoons skateboarding. So there are several murals as far as that's concerned, and kind of cute. I always think that's one of the fun things as far as murals is they can be, represent a lot of different things. As we've seen with the utility box art program, one of the things that they've done is just improve this drab utility box. And this was actually on one of their some sort of equipment that the city had that was right next to a skating area. But ultimately, what we've seen downtown with our utility box art program has just been fantastic. And you can do a lot as far as beautifying your city and doing a lot, as far as having themes is, there's a pride utility box, or at least one side of it is pride based. There's, lots of different art and in just kind of whimsical themes also. So anyway, I just want to welcome you. Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. This is the 119th installment of my weekly virtual office hours. Happy Friday. Welcome to summer. I know it's been hot earlier this week, and we've seen actually much hotter temperatures over the last few weeks, but actually Tuesday was the official beginning of summer. Hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy and staying cool. The library is our standard cooling center. So if you need air conditioning and don't have it, the library is open until 9 p.m. most days, a little bit shorter on the weekends, but just getting you out of that worst time of the day between 2 and 5 p.m. I think is the important thing. We've now reached 830 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. We've seen lots of ups and downs over the last few years. And 2 years ago, I converted my weekly coffee shop office hours into this weekly live stream address and haven't missed a week since. People still say they enjoy hearing from their mayor each week, and whether or not they're watching this video live or watching it delayed sometime later in the week, or sometimes weeks later, I see comments or get messages from people. But it's good for me to, take stock over the last 2 weeks and then, give you some news, some updates, some information about what's upcoming as far as the city's concerned. But then, of course, answer some of your questions and add some general words of encouragement. If you have any questions, please put them into the chat and I'll try to get to them today. Most Fridays, I follow up this live stream session with an in-person meeting on Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. If you need to contact me, if you'd like to set up a 15-minute or 30-minute time slot, all you need to do is email me. If you go to larryklein.com, you can see what my email address is and reserve, and see when my upcoming office hours are. That's my calendar has been there for as long as I've been on council now. Let's go ahead and get started about what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last week was fairly slow. Last Thursday, I joined multiple elected officials and friends and family at a memorial service for Norm Panetta. I did that too. That was a constant joke at the memorial service for Norm Mineta. And Norm Mineta was, a transportation legend and really represented the AAPI community. He was in Japanese internment camp as a boy in World War II. And then he went on to serve as mayor of San Jose. He served in Congress. He served as secretary on both the President Clinton and President George W. Bush's administrations. He was just an amazing man, and we had lots of people come to sing his praises and mourn his passing. President Clinton was there, Willie Brown was there, Leon Panetta, that was the amusing thing is they were always getting Leon Panetta and Norm Mineta mixed up in the Bush administrations. Mike Honda was there, Rear Admiral Noonan spoke and actually was very tearful, and it was very interesting to see so many people join together to honor his memory. And I'd met him before I went to if you get a chance to definitely take a look at his video. There's a legacy video that was on PBS, and I think it's being rebroadcast this month, but take a look at his life if you get a chance. And it's really inspirational as far as that's concerned. And then of course, what he's done as far as transportation, that's why so many things are named after him in the South Bay here. And then last Thursday, it was announced that the Bay Area will be one of the host cities for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. So we'll have soccer back in the Bay Area after many years. Well, it's here, but definitely having the World Cup here raises that to a new level. And so one of the locations will be Levi Stadium in Santa Clara. So look forward to that. And then last Thursday night was Game 6 for the NBA Finals, of course, and the Warriors finally clinched that NBA championship over the Celtics. Lots of people were in San Francisco on Monday to enjoy that parade. I didn't get a chance to go up. I really wanted to, but heard it was a lot of fun. And if you got a chance to go, I really am jealous, because it sounds like, definitely the players were in the crowds and really meeting with the fans. So hope you enjoyed it, and great to see they finally clinched that playoff. And then of course, last Thursday evening was also the first Sunnyvale Reads family night at Washington Park. And so 7 p.m. on Thursday evenings for the next, we have 6 more weeks left, after I think there's 8 weeks of those events. But it's tied with our summer reads program, but it's magicians, it's puppets, bubbles, lots of different things going on at Washington Park. Fun for the whole family. So if you get a chance to go, it starts at 7 p.m. on Thursdays for the next 6 weeks left. And then last Friday, after I signed off, there was basically discussion, or basically the CDC and the FDA finally finished their approval for the COVID-19 vaccine for children younger than 5, so basically 12 months, 6 months to 5 years old now are also available to get the vaccine. And distribution of those vaccinations for younger children has started across the country. And vaccines are now available in thousands of clinics and pharmacies nationwide. So this is again for children 6 months to 5 years of age. And if you need to find a local location to get a vaccine, you can go to vaccines, VACCINES, .gov, and you just basically put in your zip code and you can see where around us, so there's I think 1 or 2 in Sunnyvale, and then nearby cities, Walgreens, Rite Aid, all of that. So definitely there are lots of opportunities nearby to get those vaccinations. Or if you still need to get your booster, definitely there are lots of places available from that standpoint. Last Saturday, there was an outdoor expo at the Library Plaza at the Sunnyvale Library, and it was a great group. It's like there were people there. So the Sunnyvale Urban Forest advocates were doing tree tours of the campus. There was a pop-up book sale for the Friends of the Sunnyvale Library. Ultimately, there was also bike repair. So thanks to Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, as well as Bike Sunnyvale for doing bike repair and doing checkouts on your bike on the bikes. But Master Gardeners was there, the Audubon Society was there. It's a lot of fun, and I think I've heard from a lot of families that enjoyed that day. And then Sunday, of course, was Father's Day. So hopefully you honored the fathers in your life. And Sunday was, of course, also Juneteenth. So that marked the date, in 1865, when word of the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery really finally reached the farthest corners of Texas. And so, it was good to mark that day. There are lots of events around the Bay Area last weekend. So hopefully you got a chance to enjoy one of those. On this week, on Tuesday, council met. And we had several things on the agenda, one of which is we approved 4 EV ARCs, so the funding for 4 EV ARCs. Those are basically EV charging stations, except they don't require the standard, connection to PG&E or connection to the power source. So this was approved from funding from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And so what these are basically stations that have solar panels, that have battery backup, so they can have charging cells, so they can actually collect energy when they're not being used. And so the solar panels, the energy storage, are basically approved for multiple locations in the city. So there'll be, I think, 1 or 2 at the library and a few other locations, but that's all from Silicon Valley Clean Energy funding. So happy to see making it easier for people to get their EVs charged and make that transition to an electric vehicle. And then council also approved our fiscal, and actually you'll see a photo of the I think there's a photo on the front of the Sunnyvale Sun today for myself and the city manager receiving a check from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. So Girish is the CEO, and happy to get that check. I think it was for about $1.3 million. So $1 million, as I said previously, is going towards solar panels and EV storage power storage at the city hall. And then the remainder is going towards these 4 EV ARC stations to basically make it easier to add charging stations around the city without the major trenching. If you've seen what the issues were, right now we've installed them at the community center and the parking lots right at Sunnyvale and Evelyn Avenue. And if you take a look at those, you'll see that there's a lot of efforts as far as trenching and setting them aside. Here, you can basically install them very quickly and don't have to deal with all those major issues of connecting up to the grid. Of course, it's limited so that it's not as useful when you can't basically charge late in the evening. At some point, that battery charging storage, that energy storage, does deplete overnight. That being said, it allows you to charge the majority of the day and into the evening without too much trouble. And I think without all the extra work to rip up the streets and rip up the pavement and then, patching all that over. So it's a lot better from that standpoint. Council also adopted the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget and our fee schedule and appropriations limit for next year. So that was the big step that we need to do before July 1st to make sure that the city is ready for the next fiscal year. And then we also considered the draft 2023 through 2031 housing element. And so that can be submitted to the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So ultimately, this is something that we do every 10 years or so, but there's an 8-year cycle. So every 8 years, we have a certain number of housing that's required that's basically a housing allotment that comes down from the state. And then we need to show that how we're zoning, we can't actually build the housing. Sunnyvale builds very little housing. Ultimately, we fund housing, like what we did at Iowa and Matilda and Charles. We're funding housing on city-owned property. And then we take housing mitigation fees from developments, and then we help fund affordable housing nonprofits. So from that standpoint, we do fund housing, but we actually don't build it ourselves. But part of this is making sure that we have the appropriate zoning. So we are turning in our housing element, draft housing element to HCD sometime in the next few weeks after they make some changes based upon the final approval that we gave them. And then we'll hear back, within 90 days on what their response is. And so, there were issues. We're trying to make sure the Moffett Park Specific Plan was actually part of that. That being said, the Moffett Park Specific Plan has slipped a little bit, and because it's not final right now, it can't be part of the housing element. And so we actually had to do a rezone program. So staff is adding a rezone program specifically for Moffett Park, because we know that there will be some number of housing units there, whether or not that's it's the full 20,000 that we're studying, or somewhere between 15 and 20,000. That remains to be seen, but making sure that we actually have a program in place, and talking to HCD, they think that will actually be fine. And then yesterday, we had several celebrations, and they were some minor celebrations, but in the morning we had the grand opening celebration for Madison Reed, and that's a hair care and hair color products specialist business, and they've been mainly online during COVID, but they've expanded their in-person locations around the country, and so that's at the Cherry Orchard. So that was in the morning. In the afternoon, Shane Jacksite from Edward Jones had their ribbon cutting on their new offices on Murphy Avenue. And this is the old Social Security offices, if you know where that is, right near Iowa and Murphy. But Edward Jones has been in our community for years. They're a financial advisor, they're an educator. The company itself this year has actually reached its 100-year anniversary of being in business. So kudos to them. But Shane has been a fantastic community partner for years. He's been a volunteer. He's been on the board for Sunnyvale Community Services in the chamber, but it was great to celebrate with him, and lots of people came out to celebrate the new home for Edward Jones. And then last night there was a big it's our second annual Pride celebration on Murphy Avenue. So hopefully people were able to attend. A lot of people were there. It's like it's probably about 3 times as many people as last year. Ultimately, I think it was a great event. We had a lot more celebration this year, so it wasn't just music. And we're still kind of rebounding out of COVID, but last year it was just a DJ. This year we had DJs, and then we had a drag performance. We also had the Mexican queer folkloric dancers there entertaining. And it was a wonderful evening, and thanks to all the different sponsors. There were lots of youth and adults and seniors there that were allies and part of the LGBTQ community. It was just a fantastic event. So Silicon Valley Pride, thanks to Mike Klein from State Farm, as well as Shane Jacksite, for sponsoring some giveaways as far as that's concerned. It was, lots of fun glasses and stickers and all that, but especially thanks to the Chamber and the Downtown Association for putting on that event, collaborating and managing what's going to happen, and also the Sunnyvale Art Club. So take a look at my post from earlier this morning. They put together a really nice exhibit. So it was a pride flag spread over multiple colors and multiple panels that I think more than 50 different art enthusiasts, myself included, ended up putting together and putting on this pride flag. So it was really good from that standpoint. But take a look at the photos. I posted some earlier today. But it was a great evening. Happy to see that on Murphy Avenue, and happy to see the youth out there, happy to see everyone out there enjoying themselves. I think next year is going to be even bigger, but hopefully you got to attend. If not, there's always the Pride event this weekend in San Francisco. And then, of course, Silicon Valley Pride is coming back at the end of August. So we'll be talking about that later. But lots of ways to celebrate Pride Month as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. The numbers around the U.S. are finally starting to drift downward, not quickly, but from a national standpoint, we've now had 85.8 million cases. That's increased about 700,000 in just the last week, but that's down from 800,000 for the last few weeks. So we are starting to see it kind of plateau and coming down. Nationally, we've had over 259 million vaccinated with at least one dose, and almost 83% of those 5 and older have at least one dose. Of course, now we're starting to see people, kids from 6 months to 5 years also now are able to get the vaccination. So you'll see those numbers drift down for a little while as the availability as those that are now qualified to get the vaccine are able to get it. Nationally, 76% of adults are fully vaccinated. And then when you start looking at deaths, we're still seeing people pass away because of COVID. It's another 2,000 deaths in the last week. So it's, still part of our lives, even though as we're entering summer. From California, we've had 9.2 million positive cases, and we've dropped to a little bit off. Now we're at 14,000 new cases a day. That's down from 16,000 last week, but that average is turned it up. It was 12,000 2 weeks ago and 13,000 3 weeks ago. So, we're still not out of the woods from a California standpoint. Our test case positivity continues to increase. So that's mainly because we're, my guess is it's trending downward slightly, but we're finally getting into what those high numbers were. So we're at about 11% test case positivity right now. And then we've had another about 200 deaths in California. So we're over 91,000 deaths right now. And that's trending about average for the last few weeks. And then from a county standpoint, our cumulative case count is continues to go up, but we've actually started to kind of hit our peak. We've had a case count of over 370,000 cases now. That's about 7,000 in the last week. It's been about 7,000 for the last 3 or 4 weeks, but definitely it's stabilized. we've hit our peak, and from a death standpoint, we still have people passing away with COVID or related to COVID, and we've now reached 2,315 deaths in the county because of COVID. And then vaccinations, we're still doing well. We've had 94.9, almost 95% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated, and more than 68% of those that are eligible for the booster, 5 and up, have already received it. So things are good. Our county is doing the right thing and doing what it can to make sure that COVID doesn't affect us. I continue to spend lots of time advocating on our city's behalf, at the county level and at the state level for that matter, from a county, talking to county health, talking to our county supervisors, for testing. If you need to get tested, you can go to sccfreetest.org to learn about the locations where you can get tested in the county, and there are lots of places to pick up free at-home tests, as well as, go in and get tested. And then, and actually, I just got my latest group of 8 free tests from the government. So you can go to, what is it? And I'm going to forget what it is. Vaccinetest.gov, I think it is. But you can basically search online if that's the wrong URL, and get up to 16 free home tests. And then if you need to get vaccinated, you can go to vaccines.gov, or you can go to sccfreevax.org and find out where you can get your vaccines. Let me talk about some upcoming events. This morning, of course, is the DPS Torch Run. It's the torch run for the Northern California Special Olympics. And so it usually happens on Thursday afternoons, the hottest part of the day. Luckily, this year, the Special Olympics is going to be hosted at Santa Clara University. So we are the second to the last city. So we actually have a morning run as opposed to a late afternoon run. So normally it goes from Santa Clara border. It goes from Santa Clara border to Mountain View border today. Starting at 10 a.m. we'll be starting at the Arby's parking lot right at the Mountain View border, and we'll be running to Santa Clara along the south side of El Camino Real, and come out and cheer us if you want. This weekend is actually also the official grand opening for Ace Hardware at the old Walgreens location right near Wolf Road on El Camino. And they'll be having giveaways and discounts all weekend long. But there'll also be a viewing party, a cheer party for the torch run between about 10:15 and 10:45. So if you want to come and join us, I'll be running with the public safety along El Camino, but you can come join us and come join and cheer us on at Ace Hardware or other locations along El Camino if you get a chance. And then there's several other grand openings upcoming, but we don't have dates for those. So Urban Plates should be opening next month, and a few other things I've heard some news about, but they don't have final dates yet. But when that happens, I'll be happy to pass that on. Tomorrow, Saturday, is also the 8th International Day of Yoga. And so there will be basically free yoga at the Senior Center. Participants basically will practice yoga postures, meditation, breathing techniques. So if you want to join, that starts at 8:30 in the morning. So please I think you have to bring your own yoga mat, but that starts at 8:30 in the morning, and it'll be at the Senior Center, Orchard Pavilion. So hopefully you can join. I'll be joining that myself. And then there's also a document shredding event tomorrow at the Smart Station, and that goes from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So lots of things happening around the Bay Area, around Sunnyvale over the next few weeks. As we get into summer, lots of things to do. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, Tuesday, we'll be having several big things on the agenda. First, we'll be looking at approving our proposed utility rates for fiscal year 2022, 2023, and that's for water, wastewater, solid waste. And so the recommended increases this year are 3% for water, 3% for wastewater, and 5% for solid waste and recycling. And I think the biggest thing about that is, even though we're in a drought, we're only doing a 3% water rate increase. Valley Water is actually, I think, increasing 7 or 8%, and all this is from a city standpoint. We get our water from two different sources. The SFPUC we get about 55% from, and the other 43% we get from Valley Water or from groundwater. 2% from groundwater, and Valley Water continues to increase. And actually, you look at the next few years, there's lots of increases of Valley Water's rates. And water, all these utilities are basically don't give the city any money other than what it is to take to maintain the infrastructure and pay for delivery. So we ultimately have a certain amount of reserves to deal with the fluctuations of water rates and other rates. We're actually going to be utilizing those reserves to keep that 3% increase for water this year from a Sunnyvale standpoint. But all those, whether or not it's water, wastewater, solid waste, or all those are basically paying for the cost of doing those programs, paying for replacing the infrastructure and doing delivery. And so all those are important from a city standpoint, but we're basically going to utilize some of those reserves to not deal with the large increase that Valley Water is actually doing. So. And I think the increase for SFPUC, I think, is very low this year. So at least we're one of the positive things about Sunnyvale is we get our water source from two different water sources, so we can kind of play those off against each other. And then second thing that we'll be doing on Tuesday night is we'll look at approving the final El Camino Real specific plan, and this has been going on for several years now. We were looking at doing a very wide mixed use designation along El Camino, but then of course some of the state laws that went into place made it so that those developers, if they didn't want to put in retail, and we didn't want to lose that retail corridor, really didn't have to. And so from that standpoint, we had to look at ways to zone and kind of change those zoning designations so that if developers really wanted a higher density, they had to basically say that, yes, they're going to maintain that retail as much as possible. And there's certain things that they can do from an affordability standpoint and such. But ultimately, it's critical that we don't lose that sales tax base from a city, and it's also makes those communities walkable. It's right next to residential. If we lost all the retail along El Camino, immediately it's like people would have to be driving to other communities, and so that wouldn't be good for the city either. Let's see, I think that's it for upcoming council meetings, and we'll have more council meetings in July, but we'll talk about those next week. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. Let's see. Eric asked, is the city doing any live comments or just DJ on Wednesday nights this summer? So starting in just a week or so, about a week and a half, we'll start having, about 2 weeks, we'll have our Wednesday night rock and our Saturday night jazz. And so those will be restarting for the month of July and August. Right now we have, basically the DJ on Murphy Avenue on Wednesday and Thursday night. So they helped play the music for the Pride night last night on Murphy, which was a lot of fun. But ultimately we will be back to some sort of normal in the next few weeks as far as our summer concerts are concerned. Sharon asked, is there an estimated date of completion for the Fair Oaks Evelyn Avenue construction? Yes, that's now August. And ultimately, It's slipped several times, and we're looking at what we can do to get some of that money back from the developer, from the construction crew. And part of it was it was multiple agencies dealing with jurisdictions, of the biggest one of which was Caltrain. And Caltrain had some issues as far as what they were doing with electrification, and wouldn't allow the construction to actually work for a certain portion of that. It was supply chain issues. It was for COVID. And then, of course, there were some migratory birds that they had to deal with and wait for them to finish their roosting until they could actually continue construction. So all that is finally moving forward. Let's see, do we have any questions from people today? It doesn't look like many questions. So let's go ahead and wrap up. Oh, actually, there was one more question. When Frank asked, when is City Hall going to be done? When is PG&E going to hook up so that the generators can finally be turned off? DPS is opening up in July, and the City Hall will be opening at the end of, or sometime in December. So that will get rid of a lot of that. I don't know when PG&E, and I've been meeting with PG&E to try to get them to do the appropriate installation and connections as quickly as possible. That's been an ongoing discussion, but it looks like I think they are on track to get all those hookups done to make sure that we don't have to deal with generators anymore. Heather and multiple people asked, when is the Washington Park pool actually open for swimming? Kids are out of school, and it's going to be hot days in summer. But I can't figure out where to look for when the pool is actually open. So the pool has been open. Washington Park Swim Center has been open for multiple months now, mainly for lap swim. But as we've gone into summer, we finally have lots of events going on there. In the mornings, that's where the camps are being run. So summer camps are being run. But starting around noon, midday, there's recreational swim, so lots of places for kids to play in the water, and there's water features there to have fun in. So that's actually been very good. And then there's also chances for lap swim. So it's been very activated, although there are still staffing issues. I think that's been one of the big issues from a COVID standpoint, is finding people to do some of these jobs. And so actually, if you know anybody that's looking to be a lifeguard or has training, definitely, I think the Columbia pool is looking for people. So I think they actually are closing one of the days in the coming few days, just because they didn't have enough city staff or temporary staff to run those pools. So hopefully that we find enough people. But Columbia is open usually several days a week, and then the Washington Park Swim Center is open every day out the week. So take a look online and enjoy. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. I know these are trying times. There's still lots going on, but I want you to know, no matter what the challenges we face them together. I'm proud of our city and how our residents always respond to the challenges we faced under COVID and whatever other challenges they have. I'm thankful to everyone who helps out in our community, showing their generosity, their empathy. Your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together, and we will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Goodbye.